All right, how about now? Audio? Okay. So it, it turns out, I don't know whether it's because I have an insider's build or something. It turns out every time a new kind of major update occurs, the sound settings love to change themselves. It changes my speakers back to being 5.1 surround. It messes up what my default audio device is. So I guess I need to remember to check this every time I go to stream. So what I was saying before is if you're new to the channel, I've been working on kind of from the ground up programming Minecraft add-ons, which is kind of a fun way to use web technologies, JavaScript and HTML and CSS in a new fun way. And if you're new to programming, this is much more approachable than, or more fun, I should say, than your basic programming exercises you find in books and blog posts. So last week we got into executing scripts on the server side, and we started talking about checking what items a player had in their inventory and things like that. And then we killed the entity only if we had a golden helmet. So this week we're going to try to explore this a little bit more and see what we can do. I've been kind of busy and haven't had a lot of fun ideas for an add-on, so I think maybe what we'll try to do is tackle a more approachable problem first. I'm fairly sure most of you are familiar with Tic-Tac-Toe, so let's see if we can implement that by placing blocks. I don't know whether we'll get to all of it this week, but it'll be a fun starting point, and it'll probably allow us to trip up against some things we weren't aware of. So I guess we have a couple of things we need to do. Let's create like a little to-do list. So we need to know when a player joins the game. We need to assemble our board. We need to know when a block is placed. And I think that's probably a good starting point. I think the determining whether somebody won part will be a lot easier, especially if you're familiar with for loops. If you're not, then we'll talk about that here shortly. But I guess the first thing to do would be to create. Let's look at block placement first. I think that'll be a more interesting place to start. So inside this giant doc at bedrock.dev, we'll just go there real quick in case you're joining us for the first time. This is just the version currently for Windows 10. It's 1.14.30, but 51 will be close enough. And under this scripting tag, we can see the JavaScript objects we have available to us. So if we look under, we'll look at these here shortly. If we look under the script events, we are on the server side right now. We have a couple of events that we can listen to. So we can look to see when a block is destroyed, or the destruction has started, when it's stopped, when it's exploded, and when it's interacted with. And I think interaction is probably the best place for this. It would give us a couple of possibilities. One would be that we could look for when the block is placed. That would work. I think if we start to mine it, that is also considered interacted with. If it were a door or a trap door or a chest, if we were to open or close it, that would be interacted with. Also things like setting a torch on top of it would also be considered interacted with. So I guess this would give us a few ways of accomplishing this sort of tic-tac-toe thing, right? So we could give the players individual types of blocks, and then we could look in the 3 directions that you can win for 3 consecutive ones that are the color you've been assigned. The other thing we could do is, because it's only a 2-player game, is we could give one player a torch and another player a redstone torch. I guess that's a good question, because can we look to see? It looks like from this block interaction, we can see the position of the block, and we can see the player that interacted with the block. But I guess we don't see what the interaction was. And I'm curious how we discover. Oh, yep. So yeah, so we're just looking at the kind of documentation here. I forgot to switch over. So yeah, so inside the documentation on bedrock.dev, we can go by the version number. We've got these server events, and Minecraft is just wanting to pop up here. Okay. So I'll go back up to the top of the documentation here real quick. So under the script events, under server events, we can see the events that are taking place. And I think we decided I decided on your behalf that block interacted with is probably the best place to start. However, I think that we may have an issue here. I guess we could explore this if everybody thinks that'd be, if using torches is, I guess let's take a vote. Who wants to see it by block placement? Who wants to see it by block destruction? And does anybody want to just see torches placed consecutively count as playing? Because I think here we could get the XY. Okay, block placement. Okay, so we give everybody a colored block. Okay, that would probably make things easier. My thought here was that I think if we did it based on torch placement, we would end up having to query the block directly above or on one side, however we lay out the game board, to figure out whether that is that. And I don't think a torch counts as a block, so could we see what it is? Something to discover for another day. Okay. So, inside the game, I think the first thing we need to do is we need to construct a board to be played on, because otherwise we have this problem of what boundaries are we working in for the game, or is it just anywhere? Load. Okay. So we have these slash commands that we looked at for the kill one last week. But for this one thing that we can do is use what's known as the fill command. And now this allows us to set an XYZ coordinate that we're going to start as our starting point. And in this particular case, we can use X and Y, and I guess Z we might set to -1. Let's fix the weather. Clear. Okay. So we're going to start from where we're standing, and that's what this tilde is. These are all, it could be a direct place. So if you see I have this, can't point at it there because my mouse is, but you see this position 67, 67, 69. As we move around the world, you can kind of see these are our X, Y, Z coordinates that we're standing at. So I could say those exact coordinates, or I can use the tilde to say my current ones. So I'm going to say X and Y, so it's up and down, and then -1, that's going to be our starting point. And then we want to go to 2 blocks out on our X coordinates, -1. And then we want, and so this is the starting XYZ coordinates and the ending XYZ coordinate, and we want to fill it with cobblestone. And I think I messed that up. Because we did not want 378 blocks. Alright, let's try this again. Alright, so if we start here And let's just say we want to go two blocks in every direction. Let's see what that gets us. Okay. So we get 3, 3. So in one of the directions, we don't want to go up, right? So Y, we don't want to go up, so we're going to leave that where it's at. Okay. So that would work. Now, we don't want it to be exactly where we're at. We want it to be in the ground. So what we really want is to start at -1 and end at -1. Cannot place blocks outside the world. Y. Oops. There we go. Now we theoretically have our board here. So we could move this into a command so that when we enter the world, we could maybe get the XYZ coordinate of the player and then drop the board at their feet. This would also be kind of fun that as a player moves through the world. So I guess we can use that for now to just set this board. Let's look at block interactions first, and we'll get kind of the pieces put together. So we saw here that we have this event, the Minecraft block interacted with. If we go into our code, we can leverage this same listen for event functionality that we did before. And, oops. And we want to know block interacted with. Okay, and then let's just steal this chat message. I think this is a good way to do a print line debugging if you're familiar with that. So we want to look inside the event data. There's a data object, and then I guess we could look at the x coordinate. And this might be a good place to test. Okay. So now, if we place a block, no. So that is not working. Oh, it might help if we, this is just an NPM script that is monitoring our local directory for changes and moving them into where our behavior packs and stuff like that are stored. So what happened was I made the change and it didn't actually get added to the game directory. All right, let's try this again. Undefined. Okay, let's take a look. It is block position. So let's look at this. We need block position. That's our x coordinate. Let's go ahead and add another one while we're in here. And let's take a look at our player ID. We are blowing up. Oh. Player chat data. Okay. Now, with any luck. All right. So that is our x coordinate. So I didn't see the player ID though. Let's see. It is player. Data.player. Curious why that didn't. Chat data. Is it because it's not back to back, or if it's back to back? Let's just comment this out really quick and see what happens here. Player chat data. Player chat data. Oh, we've got an error. That chat event data. Error while parsing file. Can't tell if that was the last error or not. Okay. Yep. All right, we are player one. So we've solved two problems. One is now we have hooked the block interactions. Okay, and it looks like destructions don't count, so that's helpful. So we've been able to hook the interactions, so we know when a block is interacted with or placed, and we know which player placed it. So that would allow us to be able to start tracking coordinates. So maybe a couple things we could do is, let's try to think what's next. So if you place a block, we can start tracking what that is. I guess let's do that, because there are some other problems we'll have to solve, like how do players find each other in the board, but we can probably assemble a board somewhere in the world and then just teleport our players to it when they join the game. That would be one way we could do that. Or we could, craft it somehow or something. But I think for now, let's just look at like the implementation of Tic-Tac-Toe. So we know a block has been placed, right? So if I just use this, we know the XYZ coordinate that this is at. So we should be able to, I think we're going to ignore Y, because unless we'd be playing like vertical tic-tac-toe, which we could do as well. But let's stick to the ground for now. Maybe we can turn it into Connect 4 or something later. So what we need to do is now walk in all directions. So we need to go back in, is this the Z direction? And look to see whether this block is the same. And then we need to go this direction. And then we need to move both one in this direction and one in that direction to check this block. And we're going to do that multiple times to see whether we get them in a row. So let's go in and take a look at our code really quick. So One way we could do this is we could build the data structure as we get the event data. Hi, Lord MZTE. So we could build the data structure so we could create an array. I guess we would define it up here. So far, board. Oops. So if we create this array here, we could start to populate it randomly as these things happen, and it could go a little bit crazy. The other thing that we could do is to not care about tracking the state of our board and trying to keep that in sync. What we can do is query the board. So I now have the XYZ coordinate of the block that was placed. Why don't we just ask the game about the block that is adjacent to it? So let's see if we can figure out how we might be able to do that. I know from looking around in here, I don't know why let me close this real quick and see whether we open this again, we can get rid of that flickering. No. Is it because Minecraft is back behind there? Let's move it to another screen. I'm running an insider's build that recently updated, so if you see glitchiness, that's my fault for YOLOing all of the time. All right. Okay, so I know that there is a get block function that we can call. I YOLO too hard too much sometimes. I run everything bleeding edge, and sometimes the bleeding edges don't like each other. So we have this get block function, and it looks like we need a ticking area and a position object. The bleeding edge often cuts me. So the position object looks like just a normal JavaScript object with an XYZ coordinate, and we've already got that. And then it needs a ticking area, and the ticking area is kind of interesting. That's like sort of the area of the world that is being redrawn. And so the best way I think to get this is actually there's a level ticking area, and I think we're gonna have, I know I found this somewhere. I think there's a server dot, there we go, the level components. So it looks like here we can ask the server to get us the ticking areas component off of the level. So I've not tried this, so let's see if we can get this ticking area, because we're going to need that first. So let's I guess let's comment this out. Right now we're just sort of exploring all of the little pieces we need to figure out, and then we'll assemble it. So we're going to change this to server system, and this is likely what we need to do. And this was called ticking areas. Actually, we want to steal this. I should really create let's create a function here. Let's just call it print line. And this is actually really common in most languages, that there's a print line function like this to spit things out to the console. So we're just gonna recreate this. Text. Okay, so now we have a function just called printline anytime we call it. Oh, I take that back. This, because server system, yes, that'll exist here. Okay, yeah, so we have a printline function that'll just do this broadcast event. It doesn't have a console.log. There is a logs directory that's in this weird binary format. That is one troublesome thing I find as a developer trying to debug some of this. You'll get this JavaScript exceptions in sort of that same chat area that we see these messages coming up. But I haven't dug too deep into the log, so I haven't figured out what format they're in. It's a DAT file. I don't know whether it's a proprietary binary format or whether we can open it in something else, but that's the only thing you have. If I need to get beyond printline, we can use Visual Studio Community Edition that has an actual runtime debugger, and we can attach to the Minecraft process and actually set breakpoints and investigate what's there. And you know what? Let's do that. Why don't we demo that real quick? So we've got our print line here, and now we can remove all of this in theory. And then let's print line level component. And this is probably just going to say object, but that's not important. So let's show how to do this. So Visual Studio Community. Okay. So if you go to this link here, visualstudio.microsoft.com/vs/community, you can download Visual Studio proper, which has some debuggers and stuff like that in it. And this is what a lot of people use for doing C, C++, C# development. I personally use VS Code for everything. The only time I go into Visual Studio itself is when I'm debugging Minecraft. So let's open a local folder. We've got to go into this crazy app data directory. It does not work if we open up the project from our code directory. All right, so then what we can do here, doesn't really matter. Okay, so we're going to go under debug, and then we can go to attach to process. And now if we search for Minecraft, then we can attach to it. And then let's just set a breakpoint. Where is it? Here we go. So right here. What am I looking for? We can press F9. That gets us a breakpoint. Symbols have not been loaded for this document. All right, I know that I did this before. I know that if it fails, it'll break. What did I do for this before? It is under the demo add-on server. Let's see if we can get it to hit. Not really sure why. We hadn't loaded in yet. Okay. Now let's see if we can do this. Debug. Still yelling at me. So we're just going to kind of get caught in this loop here. Yep. All right, now I know I've done this before because I had to inspect. Oh yeah. So this is the client side. Why are we stuck in the client side? This is not. We want server. All right, so maybe this won't work. I'll have to dig into this a little bit. I don't want to waste too much of our time on the other stuff, unless this is what everybody wants to figure out. But I know I was just doing this the other night, trying to figure out how we ended up stuck in the client side, because that is not where we want to be. Let's see. Now let's see. Argument not an object. Something went wrong. Component any. So did you see that? This is all you really have. Let me move this over a little more. This is all you really have to operate with, and that can sometimes be annoying. Weather clear. So we can like kind of log to this chat window and you can kind of see this stuff, but it doesn't really give you a lot to work with. So I need to look into the logs a little bit better to see what we can do there. But I know that I have debugged this before. Okay. Let's check this real quick. Argument not an object. Let's just make this go away for now. I'll do one on, I'll figure out how to get this working, and then I'll do an episode just on doing debugging. And maybe what I'll do is I'll look into that as well as the logging, and then we can look at like a whole episode that is just debugging and through both logging and the attached debugger. So argument is not an object. Cat event data, cat event data. So, but that would be somewhere in here. Level component taking area. Let's take a look at, there was one I was playing with the other day. And let's just see. Nope. Packs, behaviors, scripts, server. So I'm pretty sure I had this working before. I literally just opened the one we're working on. Backup. Scripts, server. Oh no, I did have server.level. That was right. That is my fault. Well, I suppose I'm the one live coding, so it is all my fault, isn't it? Okay, so now if we place something, yep, So we have this ticking area. So now, in theory, we should now be able to server system dot get block. Is that what it was? Get block. Okay. And then what is going on with this flickering? Yeah, it's something with the game behind the browser that's making it just go crazy. Okay, so it looks like if we take this ticking area and this position object, in theory, we should be able to get back a block object. So let's see if we can do that. So we've got our, let's just rename this ticking area. And then the other thing, we had our event data dot block position. All right, and then from here we have a block.js API object. What is in this? So the position and it's ticking. Well, that's not helpful. We know what the ticking area and the block position is. Let's see. How do we determine what type of block it is? Or does it matter? Block state. Okay, so it looks like we can get the components. Okay, so we can get the components on the block, and then I guess we could look from that point to figure out the type it is. Wait, we should be able to get its name, right? Because remember when we looked at our, let's go back. Under our behavior packs entity, look at our snowman as an example. We do have a Minecraft entity component with a description and identifier. So this may be a way that we can get its type. I'm guessing it's a Minecraft block. Let's work our way into it. So this is block state. Let's just look at this real quick and see what happens. So server system, we want to get the block state, and then good old print line. This is likely going to be an object. So, but let's just make sure that it works the way we intend, that we can take that X, Y, Z coordinate. Okay, place a block, and something went wrong. Block state is not defined. Block state component. Doesn't matter how long you do this, you keep doing that, huh? I wish there was a way to like live reload the plugins in game too, so that you didn't have to keep doing that, because that is kind of annoying. Null. and then we got something went wrong. Nope, not camel case. I mean, it's possible that block state isn't something that is on there because it's not Coral. There is some decent documentation with this, but I've also found too that there's a lot of trial and error here. There's a lot of stuff that's just not documented well. Okay, so that's null too. Something went wrong. What went wrong? So we're asking for a component on this block. I guess here's a good question. Let's try this first. What is the block that we're getting? Let's check, because remember we said there's a block position on it. Let's try to spit that out. If it exists, it'll just print object there for us on the screen. If it says that it's null, that it doesn't exist, that means that there's actually a .data property on here that block position will exist on. Let's try that. I feel like as we get deeper into this, there's going to be a lot of trial and error to just sort of like discover this API. Fortunately for me, I get to do stuff like this, but I don't know whether I have the time to go through and make their documentation better. Unable to get property block position of undefined or null reference. Interesting. So that means that this get block call is what is returning null. Let's print this out real quick. I want to make sure. All right, so we did get 80 there. So that's coming through. So either it's this ticking area that's our problem. Maybe ticking area needs to be data. Let's see, get component. It looks like almost always there's a data on it. So our issue might actually be that this ticking area that comes back, we really need a ticking area dot data. And I think I just figured out a way to make Minecraft crash. Oh, that's pretty funny. There we go. Let's try it again and see whether it also crashes. Let's see. I was hoping to make it further with this, but I guess there's just a little bit of discovery this episode, huh? Alright, let's see. Yep. It's crashing again. This is pretty funny though. Now I gotta figure out whether where I can report this to. Let's figure out which part of it is making it crash. Well, I guess it would have been this line, right? You know me, Aaron, I like to break stuff. All right, let's try this again. Because I think it did say it was like an array, which is why you saw me add that bracketed 0 thing there. All right. Nope. And we're crashing. So it is definitely this get block call. Let's try to see what we get coming out of this. Let's just comment this out for now. Ticking area. Dot data. This would be one of those moments that the Visual Studio Debugger would have been extremely helpful, but it looks like that I can't set breakpoints where I need to. Okay, so what were we doing here? We're printing out ticking data. Okay, so we did get an object back, and we did not crash. So it leads me to believe that it's this get block call. Let's check out what is in the first index, if there is anything at all. Because I do remember ticking area. So a ticking area API object is literally just a type and a ticking area ID. So there isn't anything magical about this. So I don't see why this component gives access to the static ticking areas in the level. This component contains an array of ticking areas. This ticking area can be accessed by name or by UUID if they were not given a name. Well, how do we know the name of our ticking area? Let's go up here and see. Level ticking area ID. So can we just get the ID? Undefined. Okay, so it is clearly not an array, even though they said it was an array. Let's see, is there a level ticking area ID on it? Because that's what the object itself says. If we look under this level ticking area JS. So if we had a ticking area JS API object itself, in theory there should be a ticking area ID. And what is trying to eat me? Apparently getting the block is much more challenging than I thought. This should be, it's undefined. So let's see. The So that's not it. I feel like this is more complicated than it needs to be. Because in theory, we should just be able to ask for an XYZ coordinate and then get back the information about a block. That does not appear to be what it wants to do. So, and I don't think I saw any other examples in here of ticking areas. Let's go back up to the top. And I gotta move this because it wants to flicker. Okay. An entity ticking area. Ticking area. Zombie killing me. Okay. So there are two types of ticking area objects, entity and level. When a function calls for a ticking area, it can take either type as an argument. Okay, well that's not helpful. And I don't know. We might have to do some research on this one. This is quite interesting. Because in theory, we should have our Minecraft ticking areas. Minecraft ticking areas. Okay. So we've got only a couple minutes left. So let's just, I'll take this as a note to kind of look into before we do another episode to figure out why this ticking area thing isn't working. So the basic idea here, though, is what we want to do is we want to take the x coordinate and we want to start with kind of a for loop. And we'll start at our given, I guess we'll walk through this. So we want to start at the block position. Oh, I guess we're going to have to look in both directions. So the thought here is that if we took, say, the x coordinate and we incremented it by 1 and we checked there, and then we incremented it by 2 and we checked there and we got the same block type, then we'd have 3 in a row. And we could do the same thing for the z coordinate. So we've got the x going this way, and then the z coordinate would be going back, y would be up and down. We're going to ignore that one. So the other one would be we would want to do the same thing for the y coordinate. However, there's a caveat to that, and that is, in theory, we could have already been placing, we could have placed this block already, and then we could be placing this block here. So we actually need to look, we don't know where we sit, so we need to do a couple things. Either it doesn't matter how we shift the board, we can keep shifting the board forever, which might make for an interesting take on playing tic-tac-toe. Is 3 in a row when the board can continue out is forever. The other thing we would have to do would be to limit. We'd have to look at specific xy coordinate or xz coordinates to determine whether or not we've left the board. And that would determine whether how many blocks forward or back we need to check to see whether that happens. Then the other thing I guess we would need to do is look on a diagonal, which would be looking at x plus 1, z plus 1. So we would increment both of them at the same time to look at that block to get a diagonal. So I guess we're going to have to maybe look at next episode. What we'll do is when a player joins, we'll teleport them to a very specific location in the map. That way we can set a board in a specific boundary of xy or xz coordinates. That way we don't have to worry about things. Although I do kind of like the idea of exploring, like, what does it look like 3 in a row? It doesn't matter how far out you go. I guess I'm open to thoughts if anybody has any on which direction we should go next episode. Does anybody have any questions about things? I know we didn't make it very far. We got to kind of tinker with some of these things and explore some of the objects. But is there any questions anybody has, or questions you have that you would like me to address in separate episodes? I know somebody, I think it was Aaron, was asking about logging. So that's definitely something I can look at and come with some answers next episode as well. Let's switch over to more on the debugger. Yeah, I think that might actually maybe we should sideline for an episode. It probably won't be next week. Maybe I will be traveling. I will try my best to try and do it from a laptop if I can, but I'll be traveling. But maybe that would make for a good one next week, where we could look at the debugger and logging and just spend the whole episode kind of looking at that, because that would certainly make a lot of this easier. I know I've had it working in the past, and had we done that, it would allow us inside of Visual Studio to hover over one of these things when the breakpoint got hit, and we would actually be able to drill down into the data that came back as part of that function call, which would make it a lot easier than this sort of like making things up and then printing it out and seeing what happens. All right, any more questions? Sorry we didn't make it further. I actually thought we'd make it a bit further than this. I didn't assume that fetching a block would be such a challenge. We did manage to crash Minecraft, though. All right, well, thanks everybody. I guess hit me up in whispers on Twitch or YouTube comments where this ends up, or Twitter if you've got some ideas for things that you'd like to see me address before next episode. And if there's no more questions, I will hopefully see you all next week. I will be in the mountains of Tennessee, so that depends on how good Wi-Fi is. If not, it'll be the week after, and as well as doing the normal Minecraft one, I'm doing a series with Paul DiCarlo on doing applied machine learning and computer vision on embedded devices, and I actually have one sitting here next to me, a NVIDIA Jetson Nano that has an awesome GPU chip on it, and we're going to be working our way towards building like a smart security appliance that can watch live streams of internet connected cameras around the house and analyze them for, you know, the number of people or animals or cars in a frame and how they come and go, and start diagramming some of that stuff out. So if you're into kind of IoT or applied machine learning, also follow for that, and we'll be working on an episode of that for per week over the next probably month or so. All right, everybody, thanks for joining.